Middle Ages, Chapter 2. If you lived during the Middle Ages, your life, one of two things. If you were a child of a king, you lived a privileged life. You have plenty of food to eat and clothes to wear, and you lived in a nice house. You had servants, and you were one of the few who learned to read and write. You even learned how to ride a horse. If you were a boy, you learned to be a skilled swordsman. Privileged girls maybe learned how to embroider or to dance and maybe play a musical instrument like the guitar. Occasionally, girls too learned how to read. As a privileged child, you grew up to become a king or a queen or a lord or a lady. But most people in the Middle Ages were not privileged. Nearly everyone in Europe worked on the land. Most were called serfs. King. Serfs. Serfs grew food and tended the animals. Some had more freedom than others, and they were called freemen. Serfs were at the bottom of the social order and had the least amount of power. Serfs usually spent their entire lives working on the landowner's or lord's estate. In return for the work that they did, the Lord gave them to use some of the land to grow their own food. And the Lord lived in the castle or the manor house. And he owned all the land, all the way around his house. The Lord controlled the lives of most of the people who worked for him. Serfs, not educated. They did not learn how to read and write. No. If serfs wanted to travel, they had to ask permission. If they wanted to get married, they had to ask permission. During the Middle Ages, they worked on the farm that was separated or divided into strips. They lived in small houses near the village, and their houses were made from wood and mud. The roofs were thatched, meaning they're made from straw. They usually had one room. They slept on straw beds, and inside the house was a small fireplace for cooking their food. And smoke from the fire escaped through a hole in the roof. The Lord increased his wealth in many ways. The serfs paid taxes to the Lord, sometimes money, sometimes crops, sometimes livestock. Sometimes the Lord ran a mill and made or charged the serfs to change their grain into flour. Sometimes there's not a lot of food. The supplies were low, and the serfs were not allowed to hunt in the Lord's forests. But if you were starving, sometimes they hunted illegally. Is named poaching. And if they were caught, they were severely punished. In the Middle Ages, this was a violent time compared to how we live today. Back then, frequent wars and uprisings, one king against the rival king. They needed protection. Protection. Some important nobles swore their loyalty to the kings. They wanted to be loyal to their lord. In exchange for loyalty, the Lord gave protection. If the Lord needed to gather an army, he required the people on his estates to be the soldiers. If you were a boy serf, way back, from an early age, you worked a full day. You woke up before the sunrise and you go to sleep when it's dark. For breakfast, you eat rye bread and water. And before the sun is fully risen, didn't matter the weather, you begin your work on the land. In springtime, maybe you're plowing and planting seeds. You help with baby lambs and calves. In the middle of the day, you walk home for a meal of bread and maybe a small piece of cheese. After lunch, you return to work and you cut logs for the Lord's fire. In the summer months, you hoed the crops and you keep the hungry birds and insects away from the crops. He's plowing. Where's the birds? He's shooing the birds away. Don't eat my food, birds! In autumn, it's time to harvest the crops, and perhaps the busiest time of all. You help your mom and your sisters pick fruits and berries. You use a knife called a scythe. A good harvest makes everyone happy. It means there's food to eat during the winter months. A good harvest is a time of celebration for all. Nevertheless, you have to get used to having less food to eat in the wintertime and feeling hungry and cold more often than not. At times, your parents find it difficult to make ends meet. Doesn't matter if ice and snow are on the ground, you still have jobs to do. You have to feed and care for the livestock. You fix fences and barns, and you work on the land. Every evening as the sun is setting, you go home exhausted. Your day ends with a meal your mom and sisters had prepared. It's like a vegetable stew with grain and a tiny piece of meat. But maybe a little bit of fish. Then a good night's sleep. And tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all over again.